And it is my pleasure to introduce my husband, Tom, and he will be speaking on hospitality. Mary and Joseph didn't get none and why it still matters.
Thanks, Gail. Last month, the most righteous Clovis Lewis delivered a most excellent sermon on the temptation of the dark woods. This month, as we collectively take our first steps out of that wood, it's wise to reflect on what bound us to that wood. For our species, the rising ape that meets the falling angel, the woods are both a source of abundance and a scarcity of resources. The temptation of the woods is to hoard. The salvation from the woods is to share. It is one of the earliest lessons we impart to our children. Our ability to share makes us human. Our ability to render hospitality to stranger is our collective good. We are spiritually enlightened and challenged by each encounter. We are called to see the needs of our brothers. We are called to meet the needs of our sisters. We are called to cry out for the needs of the children to all children. Imagine the hundreds of Marys at our borders, the hundreds of children of God. The least we must do is tell their story, thus remembering our own story. For the purpose of this sermon, we will focus on the Nativity as myth structure, the why of the story, not the what. Since we are UUs, historic rigor is in our DNA. We must peel away some of the lesser historic elements. First, there is no historic record of a great Roman census. Secondly, do you believe for one moment that that stable where Mary labored was not filled to the rafters with Judean midwives? Or her cousin Elizabeth was not present? Get real. So when you strip away the stable, the stars, the sheep, and the serious late arriving Zoroaster wise men, you have a cautionary tale of hospitality that obscures the true physical and spiritual meaning of hospitality in the biblical times. The reality is that for 200 years, the birth of Jesus was a non-event. It was a non-event because there was no shameful violation of the code of Mideastern and of Greco-Roman hospitality. As explored in detail by Professor Kenneth Bailey, who wrote Jesus Through Mideastern Eyes, Professor Bailey grew up in Egypt and spent 40 years teaching New Testament in seminaries and institutions in Egypt, Lebanon, Jerusalem, and Cyprus. A more accurate telling would be that Mary and Joseph traveled some 70 miles through what is a luscious agricultural region, not unlike Napa Valley, and up into the hills to Joseph's hometown of Bethlehem. Think of that as coming from Lake County from Calistoga. This was not their first trip up during her pregnancy. She had gone to see her cousin Elizabeth, who lived in a small town near Bethlehem. This trip was preceded by Joseph finding out his bride was already pregnant, and the angel Gabriel explained God's plan after the fact. Fuming, he would have been within his rights to divorce her. Despite pressure from relatives and friends, he chose not to decide to keep her as wife and chose to raise Jesus as his own. As a descendant of King David, Joseph would have been of royal blood and would have been welcome to stay in a numerous number of houses when Mary came to deliver. As a responsible and caring Mideastern husband, Joseph would have made sure that the arrival in Bethlehem would be several days before to arrange a place for them to stay, and he did. It was not a roadhouse, it was a private home, probably a traditional two-room house with the guest room either behind the living area or on the roof. The guest room would have been for storage when there was no guest. The front part of the house would be on the ground floor, where the animals were brought in for the night. The family area was raised up a few feet, and a manger between them, usually carved out of stone, formed a depression for hay. Mary would have been surrounded by village women assisting with the birth. If the shepherds had found Mary in an isolated stable, they would have been bound to invite them to their home and have their women attend to Mary and her newborn. The Magi would have arrived 2 years late. Living in a global community with travel visas, databases, hotels, and restaurants, we have forgotten the important code of hospitality for the host and the guest. We forget how important honor and reputation were to a person, a tribe, or country, especially for people living in a harsh environment. The Bible is replete with moments of hospitality. The Sermon on the Mount, the feast at Cana, the tale of the Good Shepherd. In the Hebrew text, we are told the story of Lot, who gave his daughters to the mob, saying, "Now behold, I have 2 daughters who have yet to have relations with men. Please let me bring them out and do whatever you would like with them. Only do nothing to these men, inasmuch as they have come under my roof." In ancient Greek, strangers were considered to be under the protection of Zeus, who was also the god of strangers, supplements, and of hospitality. Demonstrating Greek hospitality, a guest was not asked their name or business until they had been clothed and fed. The central theme of Odysseus is hospitality, or xenos. Odysseus in his adventures constantly demonstrated the qualities of a good guest: bringing a gift, bringing your stories, showing your appreciation for what is offered. Do not be a burden. Do not overstay your welcome. The host had an obligation to protect his guests from harm, to provide assistance if needed. This sometimes meant angering the gods, as when a neighboring king provided Odysseus with a ship for home and rich goods. When he arrived home, he had found the guest's right to hospitality had been abused by Penelope's unwanted suitors, who were eating her out of house and home, and plotted to murder Odysseus' son, the rightful heir. The price of that abuse was death at the hands of Odysseus and his son. In Ovid's tale of Bacchus and Philemon, Zeus and Hermes, disguised as bakers, as peasants, were asked for shelter in the village. All the doors are bolted shut except for the humble cottage of the couple. Zeus and Hermes' feet were washed, served food and wine. The woman noticed that the pitcher was still full, even though she had emptied it several times. Being a good guest, Zeus prevented them from killing and cooking their last goose. Realizing their guests were actually gods, they raised their hands in supplication and implored them to accept their humble fare. They were instructed to leave the town, climb the mountain above, where they were asked not to turn back. Zeus and Hermes destroyed the town, and those they had found that the whole town was gone. Ahead, because I've lost my. And then there's stuff about Sodom and Gomorrah, but you know all about that. I'm going to go back where I can find my way back. In the Bible, this mandate for hospitality is further enforced in Hebrews 13.2. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. This was demonstrated by Abraham in Genesis 18:2-8, when the Lord and 2 angels showed up at his doorstep. This belief was also demonstrated during the first century when Paul of Tarsus and Barnabas were greeted in the city of Lystra. The crowd shouted, "The gods have come down to us in human form." Barnabas and Paul were seen as Zeus and Hermes. That's in Acts 14, verses 12 to 13. At the root of these stories is the belief that we are all sons and daughters of God, have the right and obligation to receive and give hospitality. There's a deeper meaning to hospitality. It is radical hospitality. It is not the Martha Stewart manual of entertaining guests or a late woebegone niceness. It is not being guilt-tripped by requests by endless year-end charitable donations. True hospitality is a state of being. It is seeing and welcoming the divine in the stranger at the door. It is making space in your heart to be touched and nourished as you touch and nourish others. It is sometimes seeing past the tats and missing teeth. It's seeing past the difference of color or religion. It is the deep listening to the other and honoring their humanity. It is being attentive and gracious to their needs. This requires learning to your own faults and your own pain, your ability to forget yourself and to move on. It is an unsettling path. It is not welcome, comfortable, chocolate, Jesus consumer spirituality. In Benedictine practice, these qualities are developed through cloister, community, and hospitality. Cloister means spending times alone, without TV, cell phones off, and being able to face the things that you do not like in yourself and to move past them so you are able to make more space in your heart for others. Community is being able to function in a supportive family, biological or chosen. Hospitality is being able to be present in the moment and really being able to see the other person and to listen to their story. It is giving and receiving stories in mutual respect and enriching all participants. Let us imagine the nativity in modern times. Imagine a young couple who've had to walk and hitch rides back from Vallejo to Clear Lake after the construction season's over. Crystal is quite pregnant. Both have multiple tattoos and are dressed in well-worn clothing. They are returning after many years to Josh's mother's home only to find it has been red tagged. There is no money for a motel room, and the warming shelter is 10 miles up the road and it is full. They see a light in the Methodist UU Church as the Sunday service is about to begin. Josh and Crystal are warmly greeted at the door. Crystal is directed to a chair while one of the lay pastoral team is alerted. They are offered a hot drink and food as the coffee hour, which had been set aside for the coffee hour. After they've eaten and drunk, Crystal is shown the bathroom, and the pastoral team asks what assistance Josh or Crystal need, and also invite them to stay for the service. Crystal and Josh do have a potential place to stay in Upper Lake, but they need to contact the family. They also need to get Crystal's Medi-Cal and records transferred. After the service, one of the pastoral team directs Josh to the phone so he can talk with his friend in Upper Lake, who is able to take them in if they can get there. One of the congregations offers them a ride. Another, a nurse, offers to help them get them established with one of the clinics and to get Crystal's Medi-Cal transferred. When Josh and Crystal talk to their friend and host, they talk about the warmth and care they receive from the UU congregation. Several months later, They walk through the church doors holding their infant. We live in a time of increased poverty in a land of abundance. We live in a land that can house the homeless if we have the will. We live in a land where no child should go hungry, but do. The story of the Nativity is a reminder, a call to action to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and shelter the homeless. The actual story is of one of what we call radical hospitality. May we all be radical as our spiritual ancestors.